What is it? Well, it's a short story. I carry a sword. I'm from the swamps of Black Marsh. Do you need me to continue, or can you piece it together from here? You're a clever one. Saw right through my glib response. All right, I'll tell you, but it's a long story, so you might want to sit down for this one. I was hatched in a small tribal village, lost in the swamps between Thorn and Hellstrom. In other words, in the middle of nowhere. As the hatchling of a small and pitiful clan, I couldn't afford to travel to the city and train under the guidance of the tribal guard. Right you are, but few boats stopped by my village. There were visitors. In fact, every few years, a recruiter from the city would come to the village and conscript those in the clan who showed promise. Only a handful of hatchlings were chosen. All of them were males. Males I bested in combat 100 times over. I figured the only way I'd be a soldier was to train on my own. So one night I went out into the deepest swamps with nothing but a hist branch. I committed myself to killing a feather serpent. On the second night, I thought I'd vanquish 3. By the first hour, my only goal was to survive. Somehow I managed. I labored through the bog and hid inside a hollowed-out tree. I waited and watched for predators, and as I watched, I learned. I saw how the serpent camouflaged itself in the foliage, how the Leviathan waded effortlessly through the swamp, simply by refusing all effort. I saw how on bright days the lizard used the hackwing's own shadow to scuttle around unseen, and how on dark days all creatures clung to the mist. By the time I was grown, I could slay 5 feathered serpents with a single slash, and do it with my eyes closed. True enough, the name came when I joined a company of fighters, many of whom were celebrated warriors from all over Tamriel. There were members who served as honor guards for tribal chieftains, and those who trained under guild masters and various regiments of the Empire. There were even retired assassins from the renowned shadow scales of legend, but none knew of who I was, or why I was recruited to join the company. The truth was, I was never supposed to be there. I had found the invitation on a courier while traveling west toward Gideon. Undaunted, I told them the story of how I trained to become a knight. I used that exact word. In truth, I'd only heard the word knight in passing, but when travelers from strange lands used the term, their words spoke with a tone heavy with reverence. That's how I wanted them to speak about me. Naturally, the company laughed uproariously at my expense. They dubbed me the Swamp Knight, and I've been that ever since. Agreed. And while I had some anxiety joining such an esteemed company, I quickly discovered that I indeed belonged. Yes, there was Arnwulf, a former member of the Fighters Guild in Cyrodiil, a big Nord man with an even bigger laugh. In contrast, Ula Wei never said a word. He was a retired shadow scale, and the only noise he made was when he sharpened his daggers. Moontail was a conjurer who conjured monsters as quickly as he conjured lies. And Elia, a Breton healer, whose lust for men had no cure. Then there was the Bosmer, Indrel. Lazy girl, that one. When we made camp, she slept in the trees, but always with one eye open. there was a Redguard named Bowden, a man whose gift of strings and tongue once earned him a place beside an Argonian tribal chief. And lastly, our leader, Anuma-La, a legendary swordsman who fought in the Great War. I used to tell Arnwulf he was ugly enough to be one. Ha 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 ha! He never laughed so hard. On dreary nights, Bowden would lift our spirits with a song. And when he sang, our spirits would indeed lift. Provided Arnwulf didn't join him. Ha 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 ha! But on some nights, when he thought everyone was asleep, he would drift out into the swamp, where only the gods and the Hist could hear his tune. He would play a song that wasn't part of his normal routine, a solemn dirge about a lost love, a song so sad it moved the trees to tears. Ulaway never spoke much, but when he did, people listened. Even Arnwulf trusted him, and I've never known a Nord to heed the advice of a lizard. He strode through the swamps like a cold breeze, and I realized how clumsy I was in comparison. That is, until a week after we boarded a ship for elsewhere. A Khajiit lord had heard of our feats and commissioned us for a job in Yorval. Ulaway was our scout, and by tradition, he always went first. But when he placed his feet on that desert sand, he started to wobble, and his tail lashed recklessly. I couldn't believe my eyes. He was struggling for balance. Ha ha ha! I've seen drunken jesters with more grace. The poor fool came to the desert and thought he didn't need any boots. I remember when Arnwulf used to get drunk. He and Elia would fool around a bit, but one time he had a little too much and got a little too brave. Half naked and beer-soaked with saliva, he climbed up the tree Indril was sleeping in. Ha 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 ha! I've never heard such a high-pitched scream. Moments later, Arnwulf slumped down the tree, a gash running across the breadth of his face. He ran to Elia, of course, but she refused to heal him. We never did find out who let out that scream, although we all suspected it was him. That's an old story, back when the Hrothgar monks had milk in their beards from sucking their mother's teats. Okay, maybe not that old, but old. I was traveling in Black Marsh with a company of fighters. We fashioned ourselves the Honorable Eight. We were an elite band of fighters, hired to do jobs common sellswords weren't equipped for. At first, I thought the honorable part was a joke. Our company was made up of liars, drunkards, and lying drunkards. Ha 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 ha! But they were all loyal, and they were all honorable. They were good beasts, mare and men. It wasn't, but Anuma-La founded the company to be good and do good, to wash all the grime that stuck in his scales during the war. As such, he'd only agree to work that didn't diminish what we stood for. But contracts have a way of leaving out the details. We were, and we did. The job was simple. Clear out a cave of necromancers that were terrorizing one of the clans that resided near the border. The clan said a hatchling had gone missing, and rumors were abound of corpses stolen for experiments, and live bodies turned into corpses. When we got there, the shadow scale Ulaway scouted ahead as the rest of us waited near the entrance. he found bear traps and tripwires. The occupants were further in, black-robed mages, chanting. The whole thing stunk like a Thalmor's wet diaper. Traps or no, bandits usually post sentries in and outside the cave. The Nord, Arnwulf though, he got tired of all the standing around, black robes and ominous words. Good enough for him. Dalum A gave the nod. Couldn't chance it. Some poor hatchling could have been on a table, about to become some sick bastard's war puppet. Sadly, no. The child was on the table like Ulaway said, but she was already dead. The people around her were mourners. Black robes. They were refugees from Cyrodiil, Altmer, Kadget, and Argonian, driven from Leaween. To the clans, they might as well have been wraiths. I don't know who struck first. It didn't matter. We killed them all. Well, all except one. It was an Imperial boy, hiding in a small crevice in the rock. I didn't know who he was, or if he was even with the refugees. The boy was a mute. Part of me thought it would be better to slay him, but another part of me saw the hatchling in the swamp just trying to survive until morning. The company disbanded. Honor brought us together, and dishonor drove us apart. Me and the healer, Elia, went north. The boy, he followed. We split up in Bravel. Don't know why he chose me. Seems to me he was better off with a Breton. But as I kept going north, he never left my side. I almost did. I never took the road and covered my tracks through Nibbin Bay. I thought if I made the journey rough enough, he'd leave. But whenever I looked back, he was always there. I kept going north, figuring at some point the boy would stop following me. Gotta give it to the little runt. He had courage. Eventually, I realized I could have walked right into the sea of ghosts, and the little Histcarp would have dove right in. I was halfway through the marsh when I decided to head back to Mortal. I turned to the pesky urchin and told him, "All right, you win." Imagine my surprise when I found myself talking to a patch of death bells. Ha 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 ha! There was no one there. Some may ask why I'm a knight without armor. Others contend I wear the mourner's clothes to honor the brave warriors I slay. Those in my company will tell you I wear it to mourn the refugees who died that day, and all the innocents who die in the pangs of war. I will tell you that there's only one thing in this world I truly mourn. My sanity! Ha 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 ha! I'm right behind you.